Perhaps you have seen social media posts from a friend about their amazing experience volunteering in an orphanage in Cambodia. They tell you the donations of food, toys and money change these orphan children's lives. But when you research the orphanage, an alarming picture begins to emerge. Most children in these facilities are not orphans, but children with living families. The orphanage exists to attract tourists who want to volunteer with vulnerable children. Meanwhile, the kids in the center live apart from their families for years at a time. There are so few stable carers in the orphanage that older children essentially raise the younger ones. They are often not in safe environments and won't have opportunities for education or decent work in the future. This was one of the findings of a 2017 inquiry into the need for a Modern Slavery Act by the Parliament of the Commonwealth of Australia. It found many more examples of exploitation in Australia, for example within the hospitality industry and amongst migrant farm workers. There was exploitation of labour, sometimes in another country, that was part of the organisation's supply chain. These situations fit the definition of modern slavery, a term that reminds us that such practices are unfortunately still prevalent across the world, including in Australia, in a range of industries and in the global supply chain of organisations. The tensions between decent work on the one hand and economic growth on the other are immense and seem impossible to solve because we have incomplete and contradictory information, or wicked problems that are resistant to resolution. Hi, my name is Suzanna Mahinder. I'm a lecturer at the Centre for Social Impact at UNSW and also a facilitator at AGSM. The UN Sustainability Development Goal 8's focus is on decent work and economic growth, and especially on promoting sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full productive employment and decent work for all. Sustained and inclusive economic growth can drive progress, create decent jobs and improve living standards. According to the UN, real GDP and labour productivity have increased globally, and the middle class has grown substantially, making up 34% of total employment. However, growth has slowed, inequalities have widened, and there are not enough jobs to keep up with the growing labour force. These inequalities mean, firstly, that those at the bottom of the pyramid often do not have the opportunity to get decent work that is productive and delivers a fair income. They have no security in the workplace or social protection for families. They do not have equal opportunities or prospects for personal development and social integration. Secondly, they do not enjoy the benefits of that economic growth as they do not have equitable opportunities. In other words, growth is not inclusive. Income inequality also has negative effects on society that leave subsequent generations worse off. This is not sustainable. How can we promote sustained economic growth? Encouraging entrepreneurship and job creation are critical, as are effective measures to eradicate forced labor, slavery and human trafficking. The goal is to achieve full and productive employment for all by 2030. Encouraging entrepreneurship requires access to banking and financial services and can support job creation and growing enterprises. However, because of poverty and inequality, this access is not available to many. Problems such as these need novel solutions. Microfinance was pioneered by Dr. Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh. Small loans were made to women, for example, to make bamboo furniture. Traditional banks would not make these loans as they considered them high risk, and poor families had to borrow privately, often on predatory terms, locking them into a cycle of debt. The business model Yunus proposed was to provide access to financial services to support job creation and lift these families out of poverty. Dr. Yunus went on to found the Grameen Bank and win the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. Inspired by the work of Dr. Yunus, Kiva was founded in 2005 with a mission to expand financial access to help underserved communities thrive By leveraging the internet and crowdfunding, Kiva allows anyone for as little as $25 to help a borrower start or grow a business, go to school, access clean energy, or realize their potential. Over the past 10 years, Kiva has enabled more than 1.5 million people to fund over 2 million borrowers in over 80 countries. The result has been more than $1 billion lent to borrowers and repaid at a rate greater than 97%. A great example of how technology can support job creation and growing enterprises. Innovation and resource efficiency can also support increased economic productivity. For generations, families have farmed cocoa in the mountains in the Ecuadorian Amazon. The region is widely argued to produce the best chocolate in the world, but the industry is teetering on the verge of collapse. The work is extremely demanding, incomes are low, and to compensate for declining returns, struggling farmers are cutting down ever more forests to make way for cocoa plants. Young people are moving away from the region. Funded by the UNDP and the Fairchain Foundation, blockchain, an emerging technology which creates an independent virtual ledger of records that cannot be manipulated and is fully traceable, was used to deliver fair results for farmers and help them protect their environments. Farmers were provided support and guidance on using resources efficiently. The partnership has delivered the other bar, the world's first blockchain shared value chocolate bar, which went on sale in the UK last year. Customers are also a driving force, and the proceeds from sales means better conditions for the farmers through better wages and training. There's also a tree planting component to the project, and that has had a positive impact on the environment. In order to promote economic growth, labor rights should be protected and work environments should be safe. Businesses are increasingly being held to account not only for their own direct operations, but also for their impact on the wider society and the environment in which they operate. The complexity of tackling environmental and social issues has been magnified by companies' increasing reliance on the global supply chain networks to produce quality products at lower costs. This responsibility has been amplified by recent high-profile incidents, such as the tragedy at Rana Plaza near Dhaka in Bangladesh, an 8-story building accommodating 8 garment factories that supply to leading global brands, which collapsed in 2013, killing around 1,500 workers. These incidents have brought increasing attention to the need for companies to engage in sustainable management of the supply chains in which they operate. Measures must be taken to eradicate slavery, trafficking, and child labor, including in the supply chain. Poverty, inequality, and the lack of alternative employment opportunities have resulted in generations trapped in a vicious cycle that is hard to break. This has led to the terrible exploitation of people, and especially the young and vulnerable. Reports of human trafficking and child labor are still reported in the media. In some cases, the exploitation may not even seem obvious, as in the case of orphanage tourism. Orphanage tourism is really trafficking of children. When economic growth is not inclusive, people do not have decent work or even productive employment, inequality increases. As more wealth gets concentrated in a small fraction of the population, stress and tensions will increase among social groups. Poverty created by dysfunctional economic systems often contributes to environmental destruction, drives people to crime and violence. Refugees can flood across borders, and wars between countries over economic resources is likely to increase. Human society will not be sustainable under these circumstances. Society as a whole benefits when more people are being productive and contributing to their country's growth. Productive employment and decent work are key elements to reducing poverty and inequality and to achieve inclusive and sustainable growth. While some efforts are being made to tackle this wicked problem, it requires real collaboration across multiple stakeholders. Collaboration between the government, corporations, not-for-profit organizations, communities, and people. The Modern Slavery Act was passed by the Australian Parliament in November 2018 after a lot of input from many as part of the inquiry. The definition of modern slavery provided in the bill is broad enough to include orphanage trafficking. Companies with annual consolidated revenue exceeding $100 million are now required to disclose how their operations and supply chain may contribute to modern slavery and explain what they are doing to address those risks. Corporations have now started looking more closely at the social and environmental effects at all stages of the supply chain. Organizational responses to supply chain issues have taken many forms, such as putting in place codes of practice, more transparent process, stakeholder consultation, and external certification. We need to continue to tackle Sustainable Development Goal 8 on many fronts, as seen from the many cases shared. We need to continue to work collaboratively to invest in training and education that provides young people the opportunity to transition into decent jobs and provide them skills that match labor market demands. To ensure that there's social protection and basic services for all, including employees in informal employment. To level the playing field so that aspiring young people can attain productive employment regardless of their socio-economic background or gender. Governments need to work collaboratively with other sectors to build sustainable, innovative, people-centered economies, promoting decent work for all. Local authorities and communities should plan human settlements to foster community cohesion and security and stimulate employment. What can we then do as individuals? We can make informed choices and support organizations that support decent work and other sustainability goals. We can support sustainable tourism. We can be more inclusive and supportive of everyone at work and at university. We can volunteer time, share our knowledge and skill, and help develop skills in ourselves and others. We can all play a part, however small, within our own spheres of control. And as stated by Margaret Mead, the famous US cultural anthropologist, never doubt that a group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.